something when I was at the shop, and a commercial for StreamYard came on.
Oh, yeah. Hey, how's everybody doing today? Welcome back to Moto Talk with Steve and Kim. I'm Steve, and that's Kim over there.
Still.
He's back with us live today.
Yeah, well, I was live last time, but I wasn't on the premises.
On the premises, yeah. That's what I meant.
I can go like
Something
this.
like that. All right, welcome back. Hey, we're talking about tires tonight, but before we get to that, I wanted to shout out to some shops that work on some VTwins, mainly Harleys, and our first one is BMF Twins in Brownsburg, and that's Bear, B-E-R-E, and he has been a mechanic for
long
time, and worked for Dell's, and then Gary Larkin and Larry Larkin decided to get closer to retirement, and I think Gary did, and moved down south,
Alabama or something.
And anyway, so
Bear's still in the same place, same physical place Dell's was.
All right, hello, Randy Schwinn. How you doing? That looks like everything's working. So I will say that when I first got back here, well, first of all, our shop computer went down, right? And so I took this computer here over to the shop, and then I'm like, oh, wait a minute, well, we got to do this Moto show. So I ordered another little computer and replaced it, but then I had to set up all the settings, and then by the time I did that later today, the internet was like zilch, so I had to go back, fix all that, and we're back up and going. So at least one guy commented, and that was Randy. And anyway, so back to the VTwin shop. So we've got BMF Twins in Brownsburg. He works on Harleys, Indians, and any metric VTwin. We've got LA Cycles up in Whitestown, and they work on mainly Harleys and Indians, and they've been doing that for decades. And then we have Steel Customs over off of 10th Street and Country Club Road. I forget the side street he's on, but you can look that up, Google. His name is Pickle, and he works on only Harleys and Indians. So,
so
keep that in mind.
Yeah, and these are references that we use all the time because we have experience with all of these. We work on Harleys. In fact, I've worked on a lot of Harleys recently. I've got 3 of them in process right now. But the things we're doing are fabricating things onto an old Harley. In one case, we're doing a full restoration on a 72 FLH. That's something else that doesn't require specialty knowledge. I've got one case doing a full restoration on a 72. Yeah, behind the curve on that.
That was weird.
Yeah, that was weird.
All right,
so,
sorry about that.
In addition to the FLH, I've got an early Harley Air Mach-E dirt bike working on that. That's kind of better and more like our lane than the big Harleys. But I also put a easy clutch on a late model Dyna Lowrider today. So, there's many things we can do, but if you're going in there to get cams put in, heads put on an Evo bike, or cam chain tensioners replaced on an 88 twin, those are things that you should go to those guys for, not us.
Yeah.
We could do it, but we'd be learning a lot of things going along the way, but they could do it in their sleep.
Not only that, but there's some camaraderie there that we're saying
they send us stuff our way. We send stuff their way.
And which, Nick, you didn't have that part in stock. So Nick Avert from LA Cycles is on here, folks. Let's give him a round of applause. Hey, Roger, Connie, Matthew. Anyway, so those are the 3 shops we wanted to mention. Those are the 3 shops that we will send Harley work and VTwin work to. So keep them in mind. Look them up on Google. And even though Hoy Vintage Cycles is about 3 months out, we can still provide the oil changes, tire changes, and a 47-point safety check and all that to your bike. Make sure it's ready to go for the summer. So look us up on www.hoyvc.com and Hoy Vintage Cycles on Facebook, and you can go on Instagram too, but I don't really use it for much, but posting a few pictures here and there. So anyway, we're on here to talk about some tires, and tires is not necessarily something I'm an expert in. I know what I like to put on my bikes when I ride them. I know a little bit about the differences between the cruiser and the sport bike and our on off-road bikes. Hey, Dusty Pine, how you doing, buddy? But we wanted to get on here and just touch a few questions that are out there. And our first question is, which tire is better? And of course, sometimes we laugh at these questions, but
yeah, these aren't our questions. These are questions we get.
Which tire is better, a tubed tire or a tubeless tire? So I'll let you touch on that because we both are on the same page on that one.
Yeah, I mean the best news is that a tubeless tire doesn't have something else to fail in it. And if it works well on the rim, the only thing that's going to damage it is something from the road. You can have a tube wear out in several ways inside a tire, and it can cause a leak, and then your tire has no air, then you can't use the bike. So tubeless tires are always better unless you're using something with spokes in the wheels, in which case there's
like the one you rode in on today.
Like the one I rode in on today and the horse I rode in on that has spoked wheels. There is such a thing as a spoked wheel that pulls from the outside of where the rim band would be inside the rim, but those are fairly unusual. BMW has some, KTM has some,
right?
And they run tubeless tires with spoked wheels. But a traditional spoked wheel like this is going to require that, in addition to the rim band, you need to put a tube in it, or it won't hold air over the long term.
Edwin Velasquez, you are muted, buddy. That's an old joke. He's an old friend, and every once in a while he'd say something, I would just say muted.
Yeah.
Anyway, hey, what's up? Hey, Spencer and Scott. Yeah. So like, you have, what tires are on that bike right there?
That one has the proper size tires. They're 18 inches on both ends because it's a Super Hawk. So the front one is a 300 by 18. The rear one is a 325 by 18. We're going to get into this a little bit, but if you change those sizes, that becomes a problem for a list of reasons. Yeah. Some people want to change them because they look different. Some people want to change it because they want to go to a more modern tire. We'll talk about that a little bit more here in a minute. So,
but yeah, basically, on this first question, what's the best tube, or what's the difference? A spoked wheel for the most part needs a tube tire. Yeah. Now they do have some newer upgraded rims that you can make them tubeless.
Yeah.
And some of them are coming from the factory that way. Yep. I think some of the KTMs and such, but there's nothing necessarily better or worse. It's just, if it can be tubeless, run tubeless. So I get a lot of them that come in the shop, and it's a mag wheel, and they want to put new tires on it, and it has a tube in it. And then I ask them, do you want a tube, or do you not want a tube? Oh, I don't need a tube.
Right.
So yeah, you just put a valve in it and you're good to go. Let's see. The next one is, what are the different types of motorcycle tires? So, I mean, some of this you all know, but if you're new to bikes, you've got cruiser tires, which would be for like Harleys and Victories and Indians, and these big V-twins. And these can be a thicker, stiffer, heavier tire. So because it's a heavier bike, and you want it to last longer, so. Yeah.
And the tire has a different weight limit. And it has usually a broader footprint because those bikes are heavy.
Yeah. So, and then you've got some road race slicks. You've got a different type of slick that you don't necessarily use on the track, but you can still use them on the street. Those typically don't have any tread in them, right?
Yeah. The basic difference of those is there's such a thing as a track capable tire. There's such a thing as a DOT tire. A DOT tire is something legal for the street. A real road race slick is not legal for the street for a series of reasons. One of them is they heat cycle real quickly. And when they do that, the rubber gets hard and brittle. So they're only good for a very short time at a very high temperature, and then they go away. So people don't often run real road race tires that aren't DOT tires on the street.
And the real road race tires, don't they peel back on the what they would call the chicken strip, or out toward the edge of the tire, they start peeling back?
Well, they can, but the biggest difference, and there may be somebody out here who will have some extra to this. If you're riding on a motorcycle that has a road race specific tire on it, you're going to find that when you corner really hard on a road race tire, there's a lot of forgiving. It'll start to slide way before it goes away. If you're on a street tire, they're harder by nature. They have a little bit less tread on them. And as a result, if you're cornering super hard on a bike like that, or on a tire like that, when it begins to lose traction, it'll be way more suddenly than it will be on a race tire.
Okay.
So when you're trying to push the limits on a race bike with race tires, there's a bit more margin of forgiveness when the bike is getting ready to slide. And that's the whole reason you put race tires on, because you want to be able to get up against the limit quicker.
Right.
Now, there is such a thing also as a sport bike tire that looks like a race tire that has very little tread of any kind. It's got some sipes cut in it, but there's not much tread at all. And those are great for dry conditions, situations where you're leaning it pretty hard, a high power bike, not particularly heavy. You're leaning it a lot, beyond 40 or 50%, which is pretty rare. But if you're doing that, you're going to want a tire that has a lot of rubber, not a lot of sipes. And if you're a road rider that needs to be able to ride in the wet, in addition to the dry, you're going to need to consider that when you buy the tire. The more tread, the more sipes you get, the more safe it'll be in not necessarily dry conditions.
So I was looking up some stuff, and they were talking about the different types of tires, and one of them was talking about a sport tour tire. Now I wouldn't necessarily consider it a sport tour tire.
Yeah, I think
you don't really see them labeled like that. But you look at the size and you buy a good quality tire that you like to ride on.
Yeah, and I think what we're getting into now is the gray area of an adventure bike versus a street bike versus a whatever. And if you're going to one of those bikes, when you're talking about riding it on and off the road, there's going to be a percentage applied to what they expect you to do with it.
Right.
If it's going to be ridden a lot on the road, the first number is usually the number of how much time you're going to spend on the road.
Yeah, like 60-40 or
right. So if it's a 70-30 tire, that's mainly on the road, some off-road. That means it'll have some blocky tread
with a little bit of blocky, aggressive tread to go off-road.
But those tires wear very quickly, and they're terrible street tires. When you get into a 60-40, it's an even worse compromise, because that means it's got more blocky tread, less of it on the road. It's not going to be all that great. In my opinion, you should either go with a tire that's meant for off-road if you're going to do that very much, or a tire that's made for the road if you're going to do that mainly. If you're going to put it on a fire road or a dirt road or a 2-lane of some sort, and it's a big, heavy sport tour, adventure bike, then you get into the 60-40, 70-30s, and it's a compromise either way.
Right. So next question, is it okay to patch a tire? We get calls on this probably once or twice a month, asking if they can bring a tire in for us to patch or plug. And our immediate answer is no. We won't be responsible for plugging or patching the tire. You would only want to plug or patch a tire if you need to, if you're out on the road and you need to get somewhere, and you would take it easy once you do that. Yeah,
if you need a flat fixed so you can take the motorcycle to a place somewhere to get it fixed,
to get some
then
help.
You would do that, and it's probably going to be okay if the tire is a radial tire, because if it's a bias ply tire and you try to put a plug in it, those don't work very well. It'll work maybe, but it won't work as well as if it's a radial tire, which is completely different in construction. And one of the easy answers is, can you patch a motorcycle tire? Not the tire, but you can patch the tube.
Yeah, you can patch a tube.
But then that means you've got to take it apart and do all that, which is low odds.
So I mean, you can do it. It's up to you. Everybody's got, it's just like you can wear a helmet or not wear a helmet, but what's smart to do?
Yeah, I think everybody should learn to do it, whether they do it regularly or not. If you do it right, you probably don't need tires every year even.
I know there's people that ride, the hardcore riders that put lots of miles on their bikes. They'll have a plug set with them.
Yeah.
And it's so they can do that. They can plug it and then ride to the nearest shop and get it fixed. So why do
motorcycle tires have uneven wear?
Yeah.
Boy, there's a lot of reasons for that.
There's about 18 reasons.
But the most common reason they're worn badly is air in it. If it doesn't have the proper amount of air in it for what you're doing, that's a problem. We've talked about this before, but every single time you get on your bike, you should make sure you have the proper air in the tires. And, if it's a relatively heavy over-the-road bike, it's probably going to need somewhere between 35 and 45 pounds in it. And if it's below that, it's going to cause the tire to wear badly and be dangerous on the road. So you have to think about that every single time. as you get into a motorcycle like this Super Hawk behind me, there's less tire on the road.
Mm-hmm.
And if you got less tire on the road, it's going to more dramatically affect how it feels if the tire pressure is too low.
Right. Hey, Alan Carlson, what's up, man? I know Alan. If you go back to the race tire thing, he's been doing a lot of track days.
Yeah.
So he's got I think a couple Kawasaki's that he's fixed up, and he knows all about the heat cycle of those tires.
Yeah, you can tell when you're riding it hard, they kind of turn a blue color on the tread surface, and if you're really riding them hard, that's what you'll see after they heat cycle. And guys that are professionals that ride, they have qualifying tires and race tires. The qualifying tires last 3 laps, 4 laps. The race tires might last 60. But either way, you can buy those hardness of the compound, how long, that sort of thing.
There's a question for you from John K.
Yeah. So the question is, do you need to buy a tire that has the dot on it that indicates where you should be putting the heaviest side? More often than not, there are tires now, brand new ones, especially Michelin's, that don't have that dot. And it's because they're pretty well balanced as they are. What used to happen is when they pull
or they're just really proud of their tire.
Or they're really proud of their tire. What they used to do was pull them out of the mold and put them in a balance machine and see which side was heavier or lighter. And on the light side, they'd put the dot because they wanted you to put the valve stem in that spot. But you don't have to do it that way. It's just probably going to require less weights to balance it if you do it that way.
Well, Kay has another pretty good question, and you and I actually talked about this today.
Yep.
On a certain bike, and I'll explain that later. But
yeah.
How important is it to put the tires on directionally? And John's saying how he had one on backwards.
Yeah, it's super important because if you're really riding up against the bike's performance envelope and you're accelerating hard, it's made on the rear tire to rotate forward on the rear wheel because the tire is engaging the road and pushing the motorcycle down the road. On the front, it would be the other way because the road is pushing the tire. And if you're, for instance, getting on the brakes really hard and it transfers the weight to the front and the tire's backwards, it's going to wear funny because the
don't you lose some braking power
you do.
Too?
Yeah. And the front tire is more likely to slide. Now that's a pretty narrow little band of performance, but it is important enough to take the time to make sure they're on the right way.
Now, one thing we sort of learned today, we had a gentleman bring in a Goldwing Trike,
a huge one,
and it was it was a big one. And he was mentioning how he wanted his front tire put on, and he said, "I need my front tire put on backwards with the directional arrow going backwards." And that didn't quite make sense to me.
Yeah, of course. I said, well, that's a dumbass idea right away.
That's a dumb idea.
Put the tire on backwards.
And these are big, heavy bikes. But what we basically learned, and we don't work on a ton of trikes, but lately it's been kind of getting that way.
Yeah, more than we'd like to.
The trikes are so heavy and big, and of course,
take up a lot of room in the shop.
They take up a lot of room. But when you're manhandling those things around corners and curves and even going straight down the road, what they are doing is they're taking a rear tire that's the size of what the front should be, and putting the rear tire on there, but turning it backwards.
Yeah, I think this customer
that operates as a front.
Didn't really understand the dynamics of what he was being told, but when he explained it that way, and Steve and I talked about it, it makes sense that if you've got a rear tire because of the weight of the front tire being loaded that way, because that front tire on a trike is trying to scrub one way or the other differently than it would if it was on a motorcycle and it was leaning and transferring weight like it normally would.
Right.
It makes sense that you'd put the heavier load, somewhat wider tire on the front, and if you do that and it's on the front, not the back, it should be turned around with the directional arrow going the other way. But that didn't make any sense until we really thought about that.
Right. Yeah. So Nick, this is a good question. I didn't even have this on the chart today.
I'll give you the same answer I gave the guy with the trike. They're stupid. They don't work. It's a gimmick.
Yeah. I never even going out and researching, just in my mind, it doesn't make any sense to me.
No, it doesn't, because they don't work like you think they might. They're supposed to find the light spot as they go around, but they don't.
They have
because
a crystal ball and they just know they got a brain.
Right, you'd be better off with crystal balls. But those balance beads are jumping around in that tire and they're not doing anything.
Yeah. So I'll tell you what the beads are really good for, and that's tearing the crud out of your tire machine.
Oh,
because all the beads fall out and they get underneath the little things that go in and hook to your wheel.
Yeah, that's not
and
good.
they grind everything all up.
Yeah, that's not
tear
good.
stuff up,
Yeah.
and then they're slippery when they fall on the floor. Right.
Yeah.
So there's a bunch of them on the floor, and you're
Like
slipping
when the
all over
steering
the place.
head bearings fall out.
Anyway, yeah. So they're stupid. Anyway, all right. Let's see.
So I saw something there
Tire
from Alan
pressure.
Carlson.
Yep. I had that on the next question there.
Yeah, it's really important that you have some idea of what your tire gauge is telling you. It should be pretty close, and there are ways to calibrate them. And this was one of the first tools I brought, Alan. I don't know if you went to our early show, but the very first tool I brought was a tire gauge, and it was a dial a dial face tire gauge. Steve even said, is that a dial indicator for measuring heights or whatever?
Like
and it does look like one. It's just a super high quality tire gauge, and you got to use them that way. The other thing is, people don't think about this. When you're checking your tires, you have to push it down firmly so you don't hear air coming out.
Right.
It's got to be up against the rubber seal inside the thing, and even checking the air will let 2-3 pounds out of it if you don't do it right. Yeah.
You want to make the sound that's supposed to make?
No, you go ahead. Yeah, that's it. The microphone's on the wrong end.
Microphone. All right. So yeah, tire pressure, super important. And I'll go back to the uneven wear. So we've seen so many different types of uneven wear. I've even seen where one side of the tire is worn totally different than the other side of the tire.
Yeah.
And some people would say, well, you made more right turns than left turns.
I think there is some truth to that.
I would bet there's some truth to that.
Maybe where they ride is a crowned road or something. You never know.
And then of course, your cruiser bikes and your guys that put the big time mileage on their bikes just going straight. Of course, you're going to have that flat line right in the middle.
Yeah, there's a lot of tire technology changes that have made that less of a problem. They put dual compound tires on, which means the center of the tire at the height of it is really hard compound, and the sides are softer.
Right.
But those tires are a compromise too, because they lose a little bit of traction in the going forward way, and they wear a little bit differently.
They're a little weird.
Yeah.
You can feel it when they get bad.
So I think the important thing to do is, for your bike, make sure you pick tires that are for that motorcycle. If you don't, you're going to be moving into territory that doesn't work very well.
Very true. Okay. So, actually this is the last question that we have on here right now. When should you replace motorcycle tires? So there's different rules of thumb. One of them would be if they're so old, right? I think manufacturer says like
most people will tell you 5 years.
Yeah.
You got to get rid of the tire because the carcass gets hard and the outside of it doesn't work very well. The age old way of doing it's the same thing you did with your car. You take a penny, and if you can see the top of Abe's head, there's not enough tread left in it. Usually even sport bike tires have a sipe somewhere where you can put something in there and measure how thick it is. But most of the time tires have measurements in 30 of an inch of tread depth. It's usually not more than 8 or 10 30-seconds, even if it's brand new. So you got to think about how thin that is. In my opinion, I think you should replace your tires anytime you can rub your hand around that tire and feel anything unusual. It should feel square, or not square. It should feel completely smooth all the way around. You shouldn't feel bumps or ridges or anything like that. And if you see a flaw in it, you should get rid of it. Like the sidewall's cracked or whatever. And we see bikes like this really often that have old vintage tires on them. And those are asking for trouble, not only because the air will come out, but they get so hard that they're like skating on ice. If you're even on a damp surface, it's not great. My personal pet peeve is with vintage bikes like these. You need to have a tire that looks like it belongs on the bike. Some modern tires are going to be similar size to these. They'll be in a different thing like a 90-90-18 or whatever. But if you don't buy the tires that look right on this bike, they might be more modern and they might have marginally better traction.
It'll make it look a little goofy.
But it'll look goofy.
Yeah.
So like in the case of this bike, it has a ribbed front tire, which it had from the factory, and it has a K70 type tread on the back, which isn't factory, but you can't get the original tires for these anymore.
It's funny how some vintage bikes don't look bad. You know, like if you take a CB750 and you put some Avon Road Riders on it, it's actually fine.
If they're the right size.
It would look more correct if you were going for, okay, this is straight out of the factory.
Yeah.
Bought it new that way. But if you're actually going to ride the bike,
but we have
nice to have that
the Cafe 750 that you worked on today.
Yeah.
That bike has modern Avon Road Riders on it.
Yeah.
But they're 3 sizes too big for the rim.
Yeah, that's
so
true.
Not only do they not fit on the rim, they take up too much room in the swing arm, in the front fender, and their shape is different now because they have to go down to that skinny little rim, and that means that the sidewalls come further around. So it compromises the way it steers like a pig when you put tires like that on, because it doesn't want to fall into the corner. It wants to go straight. And so it's a terrible idea to change the physical sizes.
John K., you're full of questions tonight, but that's good.
And thank you for that.
Biased or radials? Thoughts?
Well, you can buy tires for this bike. That's to Steve's point. Those Avon Road Riders are more likely to be radials, and you put them on, and if they're the right size, they'll probably service well and be fine. But bias ply tires like these are going to feel different. They're going to be less harsh on the road, but they won't wear the same as a radial tire. The thing to remember about bias ply versus radial tires is don't mix them. Don't put a radial tire on the front and a bias tire on the back, or vice versa, because it'll cause squirreliness because of the way the tire carcasses feel.
Safety tip of the day.
Safety tip, one of the safety tips of the day. And to Dusty's question, yes, a burnout, a big, long, smoky burnout will affect tire wear.
That is correct, Dusty.
Yeah.
When you Googled that and you found that answer, you got it right that time.
Or if you're like me,
trust the internet.
I know. If you're like me, a big, long, smoky burnout can tear the entire front end off your Corvette. That's a completely different conversation than this one.
We do.
But if you want to know about it, I can explain.
Yeah. One thing we didn't touch on is, Roger says Avon Road Riders are bias tires.
Oh, are they? Okay.
See, we don't
know everything.
We don't know it all, guys. Just mostly. Okay.
Not really.
Hey, so one thing we didn't touch on, and of course you got a lot of people doing these resto mods and changing every little thing on their bike. And of course we see a lot of unsafe things, like, rake or no front brake or whatever. And you were talking earlier about different sized wheels and rims and tires on bikes.
Yeah, we see all kinds of things, but one very common thing that we see is somebody brings in a Honda CB750 and they've put a Harley tire on it, a 16-inch Harley tire. We actually had a customer come in and say, I have this 750 Honda. It's got a Harley tire on the back. I can't get it onto the center stand. Well, the reason you can't get it onto the center stand is that tire's 2 inches shorter than the tire that was on it before, and you have to lift 450 pounds of motorcycle another 2 inches, which is really hard to do.
2x4. That's how you do it.
Yeah, that's kind of the only way you can do it. But the other thing is, people like the look of those big Firestone balloon tires on the front. And even if they change the rim, that means that big fat front tire is going to want to push in a corner. It doesn't want to try to turn. Alan Carlson's got a message here as well, saying when you put a wider rim on and a wider tire patch, it reduces how much tires on the road, which is absolutely true. You would think putting a wider tire on would give you more contact patch, but it doesn't. It just changes the shape of the outside of the cross section, and then it doesn't work so well.
That is true. Well, hey, we're going to wrap it up. You have an essential item to show us?
I do.
Today?
Hang on a second. I'll go get it.
It's
right here
Super
next
Hawk,
to
did you?
I did not.
Watch your extension on your...
Yeah, I'll be good.
These are high-quality $5 headsets right here.
Should have picked up Killer. He's right there.
I know it.
You need to have this. Not necessarily this part, but you definitely need this part. If you don't have air in your garage or your shop, you're missing out on a terrific opportunity. You really should have air, because air can fill your tires. It can run power tools. It can run a paint gun. It can do any number of things that'll change your relationship with the motorcycle just because you have air. And anymore, you can buy a pretty effective air compressor for less than $150. So there's really no reason not to have one. And you can get one of these little yellow deals that curls back up and gets out of your way, but you'll thank yourself if you don't have your own air. You need to get it.
It's not a bad idea to have a portable air tank too. You can take with you on a trip or whatever.
Yeah, and you can make a portable air tank out of a propane tank for like $2. You can buy the fittings to put in there, and they work great.
All right, guys. Hey, thanks for all the comments and suggestions. And if you have anything you want us to talk about, even if we don't know anything about it, we will talk about it, as long as it's moto related, I guess, right?
Yeah, and Dusty's right. I have more than enough hot
But
air.
we will tell the story about the Corvette one of these days.
Maybe. I don't know.
See y'all later.
So long.
Hey, Bill Rice. Good to see you, buddy.